our previous sessions, this is our third session today. Our first listening session was about us getting to know each other and our work. So understanding the backgrounds of everybody in this group, what kind of work people are doing. And then last week was on disaster impacts and capabilities of Indigenous communities. So what disasters have we seen impacting Indigenous communities, tribal areas, and how does that affect the capabilities and the livelihoods of these communities? And so with that in mind, today we wanted to transition into really talking about the research that is out there and what are the gaps that we need to fill in that research. And so the guiding question for today, there will be two, but the first guiding question today, what are the critical gaps in public health disaster research that we must fill to improve conditions for and capabilities of Indigenous communities? So we talked about some of those impacts. So now what kind of research needs to be done to help address those issues? And just based on some lessons learned last week, recognizing that the breakout rooms, maybe we're not the best approach to doing this. We're gonna stay in the main room today and just open up the room, open up the space, rather than doing a Jamboard as well. We'll just do a conversation with everyone here and really highlighting those of us that have some experience, either lived experience or very close research experience with these communities, and really trying to prioritize those perspectives. So I will put the question in the chat again so I can close out of these slides. We can all see each other. And then I'll encourage anybody, you're welcome to respond, add some ideas to the chat, or simply unmute and share. So let's do that. Let's stop the share. All right, I'm gonna add the question into the chat. Yes, Lori.
Melissa, I don't mean to put the wonderful Tracy Thomas on the spot, and I don't know what she can share, but I do understand the CDC has been working on a scoping review. And I'm not sure if the scoping review was going to specifically look at this question of the critical gaps, or if it's more about what we already know. And so Tracy, I don't know if you can share anything about that scoping review, or if that might help us to know sort of what is already out there, or what's being assessed. Thank you.
Yes, you are putting me on the spot, Lori, but so with the scoping review, there's a recognition, many are familiar, with the FEP capabilities that CDC developed in 2011, I believe. And, essentially it provided a framework and for helping state and local jurisdictions, a framework for, what type of capabilities and functions are necessary in order to have, help communities to be, able to respond and recover from threats and emergencies. And so while, a lot of the information that's in the literature may look into this, there's very limited that is known about the application of these capabilities, development of these capabilities in at-risk communities, or I know that's been as a new term now. I think it's access and functional needs. And especially in tribal communities. And so, we want to know whether or not, the functions and definitions according to the FEP capabilities, are they really applicable in tribal communities? And, given that tribal communities do rely on, a lot of spiritual traditions, whether or not they would define these sort of set of standards, particularly around recovery and resilience and preparedness. How do they characterize that in their communities, and whether or not their characterization of preparedness and resilience is in alignment to these definitions that are part of the FEP capabilities, or whether or not sort of new concepts are really more applicable. So that's what the scoping review is hoping to look at, the extent that has been studied, and whether or not there are some insights that we can learn as to how to best define preparedness and recovery in these communities. So that's just a little bit of a high level overview of what we're hoping to learn from the scoping review.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for that overview. And Heather, I know you raised your hand.
While I was listening to Tracy, it made me think about something that I've been wondering, and this is a very potentially selfish question because I'm wondering it for my dissertation, but I'm wondering, and I'm hoping maybe Shelby might know the answer, or anyone else who's familiar with Native languages, is there a word for disaster in Native languages, and what is that word? And like, for example, other languages might have catastrophe, but not really an exact equivalent for disaster. And so I'm just wondering, what are those words for disaster? Do they exist? If they exist, what are they? How similar are they? Like, was there kind of a maybe shared concept for that idea of disaster, or was it really distinct for specific groups or anything like that? And I'm also wondering if any Native American people have written one of those pieces that are so common in our field. What is a disaster? But I'm looking for one specifically by a potentially Native American or Indigenous person.
So to give my opinion, I'm not sure if there's like a word for disaster in my Lakota language. I know there's someone else on the call that is Lakota. If they know, they more than welcome to step in, but I do know we've had natural disasters in our tradition or in our oral stories. So I will ask, because that's a really good question and really something cool to know. But I can ask elders and get back to you next time.
Thank you. I read a very interesting Lakota story while searching for this answer, and it was about the creation of, I think, the Red Valley. Is that the right name for the location? The Red Valley, I think. It was a place that, like, hundreds of thousands of years ago, had a lot of volcanic and seismic activity. And the way that the Lakota described the area was as being part of a race. There were a bunch of very, very large animals running a race, and only the winners would be able to exist in a more peaceful world. And so that's why there were also a bunch of bones of animals that the Lakota could not recognize as being living at the time. So I was just wondering also if anyone might know other interesting stories like that about creation or disasters. They describe it as being a very, very tiresome, exhausting race. So it seemed disastrous.
Yeah, that story is associated with what is called the Great Race for Lakota, and is basically a story about like before long ago, and the mammals were really huge, like the buffalo were way bigger and stuff. There wasn't really any protocols on who eats who. So it was a race against the four-legged and the two-legged to see who like is the top of the food chain, I guess. So the four-legged were obviously beating the two-legged because it was humans running, and then they were gonna beat them, but at the last second, a bird swooped in and won the race for the two-legged. So that's why we eat the buffalo now, or that is the story we were told was why we eat the buffalo, and it's not the other way around.
That's so cool.
Yes, Lori.
Thank you. I was going to share and uplift one of my former graduate students, Lucy Carter, who graduated with her master's degree at Colorado State University. And she is actually an Indigenous person from New Zealand and came to the US on a Fulbright and became very interested in policy making and policy applications in tribal areas in the United States. And so she wrote this really brilliant master's thesis that revealed a lot of disparities in terms of the number of FEMA approved mitigation plans in the 570 plus federally recognized tribal areas. And then she also looked at the disproportionate toll of disaster, and her thesis really got at sort of that vicious cycle that when you don't have the approved mitigation plan, then you can't unlock the dollars after a disaster to hopefully build back better or in a more resilient way. And so to get at the theme of today's session about research gaps and where she sort of ended her thesis, that I think there is still so much need for more work in this area. So her work revealed the disparity across the 10 FEMA regions in terms of the number of tribes that do or do not have these mitigation plans. But then her thesis, because it was relying on secondary data, wasn't able to answer why. So why do certain tribes have the approved mitigation plans? Why do others not have? Is it a resource issue? Is it a cultural issue? One of the things she writes about in her thesis, Heather, sort of picking up on your theme, was that and obviously recognizing the huge diversity of languages that are spoken in different tribes, but certain tribes actually asserted that by talking about planning for disaster, there could be a cultural worry about then provoking that disaster. And so the whole process of mitigation planning might actually run contrary to some cultural ideals. And so again, her thesis was absolutely brilliant. It absolutely got at the lack of mitigation plans that may exist in certain tribal communities. But again, it wasn't able to answer that next step of the why. And if we could answer the why, as Lucy wrote, then maybe we could figure out what resources. Is it technical assistance? Is it more funding? Is it making the mitigation planning process more culturally appropriate? And so there are all these sorts of questions. And I think this gets at Tracy's root question about preparedness as well, that I think is really important. It's the what, but also the why that we have to be thinking about. So just again, with all kudos to Lucy Carter and her work, and I'll put the link in the chat to her thesis. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Lori. That's such a great point of a gap that research identified of where we need to go and what questions we need to ask. And that's very interesting because usually conversations around mitigation plans don't really consider the cultural reasons why that might, these plans might not be in place and approved. And they kind of just try to be people's instinct to solve those is technical assistance. Let's help them, let's do it. And there isn't really any conversations about the reasons why and the factors why that go beyond just they need more money. And while that is important, there are it's such a multifaceted issue. And so I'm interested in knowing if anybody else has a similar experience with a particular issue that they have seen researchers try to address, but that their research may not be completely understanding of all the cultural factors going on in these communities or in these areas. And if there's anything that we really do need to be asking that we aren't. So it's not even what gaps are there, but what are the questions that we need to ask to be able to like get at those gaps. And so that was the second guiding question, and it kind of turned into a great segue to include that question here as well, to get all of you thinking about both questions: is what are the gaps, but then what research questions do we need to ask moving forward, and what kinds of methodologies should researchers engage with to answer these questions. And so I'm interested in learning more from Indigenous people on this call, or those that have done close work with Indigenous communities, to learn from you what is needed and what kinds of questions other researchers that are interested in engaging this, what should we be doing? And what kinds of questions should we be asking? And I put that second question in the chat.
So I'm wondering, Melissa, are people on the call, are they really early in their career with conducting research in these communities, or, is it of interest, or, maybe, what we have here are people or researchers who may not have that breadth of experience. So I'm not sure who's here today.
That's a great point. I'll let Nancy share first, and then that's a great question, Tracy.
Hi, aloha. I've been a planner for way longer than I want to admit, but actually started working with Native Hawaiian communities when I came back to Hawaii and started grad school in 2003 at University of Hawaii. And my professor, Luciana Minerbi, made it very clear to us that we had to ground ourselves in the traditional knowledges and belief systems of the Native Hawaiian people, and particular to place. So it was really important that we understood place first, understood the history, understood the legends, documented all of this before, and a very important component of that is interviewing the elders, the kupuna. So we did a lot of that. And I've done it on a number of different projects as a research assistant and as a professional planner. And I'm after, 20 years of doing this, I'm still learning new things all the time. One of the things that is a little challenging when working with Native Hawaiian communities is there's a certain element of fatalism. And like kind of going back, although a lot of folks are now Christian, there's an ancient older belief system where, the gods are in charge, right? And so a lot of the emphasis is on balance and reciprocity, and making sure that, if you take care of the land takes care of you. But one legend that has always, I lived on the island of Molokai for 6.5 years, and I learned a lot while I was over there. And there's a chant that talks about the 3 winds of Hina. And if the people are not, being respectful, being in harmony, and doing things to keep things in equilibrium and balance, then Hina opens her wind gourd and releases the first wind, which just kind of shakes things up and all of this. I'll try to find a good link and paste it into and then, if people still don't wake up and get it, then she opens the gourd again and the second wind comes out and it's much stronger, causes damage, people might get injured, that sort of thing. If people still don't change their behavior and refocus and take care of the land, then she opens the third one, which I would call a Cat 3 or higher hurricane, and it really just wipes everything out. And that's so the gods will restore balance if humans aren't maintaining that. And so I think that whole worldview is very native. It's very indigenous and aboriginal. And, it's just kind of wrapping your head around that whole worldview of we do have some agency, but it means changing our behavior. And that's hard when we're talking about climate change, because there's a lot of things happening in other places that we don't have control over. But, I'm going to be starting a community resilience planning process on the island. I got a NIFWF grant to do that. And it's going to be 2 years. And that's where we're going to start from. We're going to start from this legend of Hina. And just what does that mean to everybody? And how is the island out of balance? There's been a lot of impacts from colonialism, from Americanization, Westernization that have been very damaging to the island. So we really want to listen to the people, the youth as well as the elders, and just kind of help bring some of them back to this awareness of this is your culture and your history, and it's amazingly powerful. So sorry for talking too long. But.
No apologies. This is great to listen to and to learn from. And I thank you so much for sharing that. And I think also Tracy brought up a great point that we also just don't know much about why everyone is here. And we don't know who has experience, either lived experience or experience doing research and about these issues and with these communities. And so our group is small enough that I think we can do a quick round robin of why is everybody here? What is your background? And then we can go back to diving in depth more with each of these questions, especially with some of the important themes that Nancy raised. And so Nancy, thank you for sharing a little bit. And so I will go with the first person I see on my screen on my side. Nania, do you want to share some about why you are here and any experience you might have working in these areas?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Nania Campbell. I am the Deputy Director of an organization called the Bill Anderson Fund. We work with doctoral students who are historically underrepresented minorities, and the focus of the organization is to expand minority representation in hazards-related fields, whether it's research or policy or practice. So we work with Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students. And so I'm really here just to listen, to learn, and to see where there might be opportunities for our students to be able to support, to better support the issues that you raise and uplift as important. But really, I'm just here to listen and learn, and I'll have to apologize in advance. I have an overlapping meeting that I'm going to have to get to in a few minutes, but I just appreciate you making this space.
Thank you. And I'll just keep going. Heather?
I'm a graduate student in the Natural Hazards Center at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm here because I want to learn how to be a better ally, first and foremost. And also, I'm very curious about Native American perspectives on disasters and catastrophes, as I previously stated.
Thank you. Simplice? I'm so sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name. Simplice, are you there? Oh, we can hear you unmuted. Can't quite Thank you. Maybe some technical issues. That's okay. Mary, and simply say if you want to introduce yourself in chat, that's also great. Or we can just come back to you a little later. But for now, Mary.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Angelica Painter, and I'm also at the Natural Hazard Center. My research focuses on how we can better understand social vulnerability in a localized context. And although we have these amazing theoretical understandings of what makes populations socially vulnerable, part of my research wants to come from communities and how they perceive their own risk to natural hazards. And in the region that I study, there are many, many tribal areas and lands where we need to engage with these communities and how they perceive their own risks to vulnerability. And on top of that, I am also a methodologist, a quantitative methodologist, and I want to better understand how to respect things like data sovereignty. And I think that's when we talk about research gaps, I believe that's something that's not very well known in the research field of like, how do we respect data sovereignty and what does that even mean when we conduct research?
Thank you. Shelby, I know you are also the co-lead here, but I don't think some of these folks may be new. They weren't here for the introductions in the first session. So tell us a little bit about why you're here as well.
My name is Shelby Ross. I'm enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe and was born and raised on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. I am currently a PhD candidate within the geography department, and I am conducting my dissertation research on climate change and Native American health, and where I'm focusing on extreme weather events and their impacts on type 2 diabetes within the Northern Great Plains region and within indigenous populations. So I'm really interested in climate change and Native American health, and also traditional ecological knowledge and how that can be applied to climate change and Native American health research. And yeah, so that's me.
Thank you. Silvana, do you want to go ahead and share?
Hi. So I think I was probably one of the first people, I'm gonna dare to say this, hopefully not too wrong. I was probably one of the first people to get a doctorate degree in resilience to critical infrastructure civil systems. So I'm coming from a background in management as my bachelor's, in planning for my master's, and then engineering for my PhD. And I had the opportunity to look at disasters, extreme events, put in context the different political views, but always requesting and, trying to stand up for good science. That is the one that you always looking at everything, including things that you may not agree, because we all have bias, right? And having had the opportunity to work in different big size projects with the World Bank, foreign nations, and even participating in different categories with United Nations, the most recent interactions being with the United Nations ARISE group, that is the private sector. So I've been very interested in working with tribes. So from my background, my mother comes from a line of native Brazilian Indians. And I have a daughter that her father's side has Native American Indian. So I'm gonna say that this aspect of the cultural side of things, I consider myself pretty naive, don't know much about it, but very, very interested, because I know the fight that has been put in to be able to establish, sovereignty for tribes and everything. And I have been hoping to be able to help and add and learn, be part of a community of interest that can defend, how tools and solutions and research can be brought to tribes. So there's a lot of this human interaction on the things that I do. And even with the hard side engineering, all the things that I usually am involved with is the end user, is the management, so the outcomes will produce the proper solutions, and we all need buildings, roads, all these different types of things. So it's like really the resilience, really looking at the opposite side, that is failure and disruption, really trying to avoid getting to the failure end, permanent disruption and things like that. So this is a little bit about who I am and, why I'm here with all of you. A lot to learn because you all have wonderful backgrounds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anderson?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anderson de Figueiredo, and I'm working as a postdoc within WIACT, which stands for Wyoming Anticipating Climate Transitions. So here at the University of Wyoming. And we intend to work with the Weaver Indian Reservation. So we still need to tribal authorization, but I hope we can work with them, like planning some, working with some issues of extreme events in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Brenda? Brenda? That's okay. Chelsea?
Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Lenoble. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Central Florida. I'm in the Industrial and Organizational Psychology doctoral program. And my research is focused on the intersection between workplace and societal resilience. And so that kind of involves the things that organizations do that influence individual and team well-being, but also sort of how organizations can promote the well-being of society, and how things like the natural world can influence the well-being of individuals and teams within organizations. And really, I'm so interested to be in these sessions to really learn and listen, as others have said before me, but that's my goal. I'd love to see if there's opportunities for my work to support the initiatives or kind of topics or issues that are raised in these sessions. But in terms of kind of the rest of it, I really just want to listen to what others have to say and kind of wait to go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Chelsea. Lucia? Lucia? We can go to Deb.
Hi, everybody. My name is Deb Wetherill. I am in the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We have a new section of our department that's dedicated to medical operations in the Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response. And so I joined this team in February, and I'm really here to learn, just like everyone else is saying. I don't have a whole lot of entry level. I am at entry level knowledge in terms of a lot of tribal and native emergency preparedness response planning. And so really trying to learn for the benefit of my own state here in Colorado, what that looks like for the state being able to support and integrate into the plans that are already there. So that's me.
Thank you, Deb. Christine?
Good afternoon. So I'm joining you from Ottawa up in Canada. And so I don't have any experience on the US side of things on these issues. But the reason I'm here is because I teach disasters, humanitarian action, and I want to bring in Indigenous perspectives into the courses that I teach. So I'm here to listen and learn, and especially to find resources that I can actually use in the classroom, because I've been part of discussions where Indigenous people have shared stories, but they're not stories that I can actually share or teach in the classroom. So if there are resources that are published and I can direct students to, then I'm comfortable sharing those, but not relaying stories that I don't have the responsibility or the authority to share. I'm also working with some students, some graduate students who are looking at environmental migration in First Nations community up in Northern Canada. And I'm also here because of my own personal journey towards reconciliation. And as a way of educating myself, I'm also taking a course on the First Nations principles of OCAP. So that's ownership, control, access, and possession. So speaking to what Mary was talking about on data sovereignty. So I'm excited to hear more about that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Rowena?
Hello, my name is Rowena St. Pierre. I am a Cabo tribal member in Washington State. We are the largest tribe by landmass here in the state, and I'm the new climate action coordinator for my tribe, and I'm kind of the only person on my tribe that's kind of spearheading an adaptation plan. So pretty soon I'm going to be gathering all the managers and different departments of the tribe to come as like a holistic approach of everything. And so I do want to bring in our Indian health services and do data collection because, you know, as we're taught in our culture, everything is interrelated. And so I'm trying to grab all the components that are going to be affected by climate change. And, you know, one of the big ones is human health. And so, like, I'm going to reiterate what someone said earlier is that if we take care of the land will take care of us. And so I really am here to learn. And I have projects going on my reservation where I'm trying to bring in greenhouses so we can either, you know, have self-sustainability, have food sovereignty, and it's going to be powered by solar. So we're kind of just working at new ways of how we can be self-sustaining and a new modern fashion, I guess, and bridge the gap between traditional ecological knowledge and modern day technology. That's kind of where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Ines?
Yes, hi y'all. Ina, she, her. I am with the Oregon Health Authority in our Health Security Preparedness and Response Program. And so looking at doing this from the state level, and of course at the state level, the people who are most important for us to work with are local and tribal. And so we're trying to do more and do better. And that's where being able to be in these spaces, and this was passed on to us, one of our tribal partners shared this opportunity as a way to tune in with other folks such as yourself. And sounds like it is a really fantastic group of folks. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And Tracy, I know you shared quite a bit earlier, but do you want to share a bit about your role, why you're here, why you're calling in, and yeah.
Yes, you know, just briefly to say that, you know, the CDC, within our office, we're very interested in expanding, you know, our portfolio of efforts in tribal communities. And so this is just one of the initiatives that we're supporting. through NHC, and Lori has been great in, developing these listening sessions. So, as with others, we're here to learn as well. So.
Thank you. And then Jen.
Hey everyone, I'm the Deputy Administrator of the Natural Hazards Center, and like everyone else said, I'm here to learn from all of you, but really to better understand how everything we do at the Natural Hazards Center can uplift the work of others and make sure that we are helping to create and socialize the best tools and resources for researchers to do their work in the most ethical way. And so anything I can learn or help with or help uplift, that's my role here. Thanks.
Thank you. And of course, Lori.
Thank you. And just Shelby and Melissa, thank you for all the work you've put into these sessions. It's been really incredible. And also just joining with the rest of you, saying that I'm here to listen and learn, and just over the years have been so inspired by what I have learned from my students and from researchers who have submitted proposals to the Hazard Center or reports that have helped me to think differently about traditional tools and methods and approaches that we sometimes take for granted in our hazards and disaster field, but bringing a new and expanded lens, how that can really reshift our focus in new and dramatic ways. And so these listening sessions have already been really doing that, and just thanks so much.
Thank you. And I know we had a few people we went through because I think there were some technical issues. And of course, Nancy, you had God before we introduced everyone, but you did kind of introduce yourself, but you're welcome to share more if you would like to. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, since 2012, I've been working for the State Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And so I've been focusing specifically on what is basically the closest thing to reservation land that Native Hawaiians have. And there's a lot of challenges, wildfires, flooding, coastal erosion, the whole works. And so it's been a real education and an opportunity. And I'm really glad that the federal government is recognizing the importance of allocating resources to Native communities. So I'm really hoping the SNFWIF grant sort of kickstarts a lot of other projects on Hawaiian homelands. Counties and the state are doing a lot of climate change adaptation work, but they can't focus specifically enough on Hawaiian homelands. There's some overlap, but I'm trying to fill that gap. And we really need to do our own climate action plan statewide. We just don't have a lot of bandwidth. I hear what some other folks are saying is that I'm the only one, and so it's hard, but just keep raising consciousness, and awareness, and hopefully the resources will keep coming to do this work. So, mahalo.
Thank you. Thank you. And so it really does seem like a lot of us are here to learn without so much of the experience. And so that's great to know that we're all in the same position. I personally am, I mentioned earlier, I'm a research assistant at the Natural Hazard Center, and my research focuses on Mexican immigrants, specifically in Houston, Texas, and looking at what that recovery has been long-term since Hurricane Harvey made landfall in 2017. And I think there's some overlap, but of course, what I have learned in my research is not something that can necessarily just be generalized to another. And so it's great to start these conversations. And if I may, I would like to summarize a little bit of what has been said thus far, and then maybe see if we have any final remarks, any final thoughts based on what has been shared. So it seems like there is consensus that especially among tribes and indigenous communities, that this quote came up more than once: if you respect the land respects you. But there have also just been a lot of changes due to climate change, impacts of westernization, and colonization that have really impacted these communities. And so there's a lot going on here that goes beyond just individual behavior or people in these communities changing their behavior and respecting the land. It's more so a much bigger cultural, societal issue of westernization and colonization. And a lot of the research that it seems these communities are, based on what has been said, really wanting is that it needs to start from a position of cultural respect, with that understanding, that historical understanding, as well as what are the cultural traditions, the cultural stories, the cultural definitions of words that are adopted in these communities, and building off of that, and wanting to have, resilience and food sovereignty and sustainability and getting all these different facets together so that there is resilience in these communities without or before getting to permanent disruption. But that it seems that it is a bit difficult because of these big factors that have changed a lot of the climate, the land. And so that seems to be a lot of what has been said today. Is there anything anybody else would like to add or clarify there? Something I may have misrepresented, didn't quite totally capture. We also have the recording to just go back and make sure we have the language down perfectly. I am also just, this is from my notes and recollection right now, but definitely you are all welcome to either unmute or get in the chat and share some more.
So I think something that hasn't been mentioned is many, or for one, Indigenous communities are not all the same. So some tribes are well off financially and other tribes are really not well off financially. So there's like my tribe, we don't have the resources just to like have background data or baseline data. One, we don't have the tools or the equipment, and two, we don't have the people to run those tools and to provide like a longevity position for them to continue to do this work within the community and build it throughout the years. That's one issue that I know is existing in my community when it comes to disasters and environmental hazards as well. But yeah, like financial resources is hard to come by. And as mentioned before in the first meeting, that many communities are aware of the issues, but aren't able to like apply to existing funding sources because they're required to make all these efforts or like conform their issue into what the award is calling for, and therefore they're not successful in receiving those awards. So I think it's really important that funders consult with tribes specifically, or the specific tribes that are in need, and know that not all tribes are the same with their issues. So that is really like, I know we want to like have an overarching way of implementing into Native American communities, but it's really hard to do that when we're all different and we all have different issues. And that's why consultation with tribes is really important. And like what this listening session was designed to be was really a good idea for that. But yeah, as you can see, it's kind of hard to get Indigenous professionals to come aboard and to really trust like our federal entities to really show that they do care about us and do want to help us. So, because we've heard it all before. So that's all I wanted to add, but
I wonder too if that, thank you for that, Shelby, if that in and of itself is a research need when there have been successful collaborations. Have they actually been documented? What were the practices and processes? What was the time scale to develop the trusting relationship? What did that look like? Because I think so often, obviously, the drivers and research are reporting on the intro, methods, results, conclusion. And we don't have space oftentimes to really reflect on the processes that undergird the successful research practices. And so, and I think that has been another thread. Melissa, you did a beautiful job with the summary. And I love that the questions you and Shelby raised also left space for sort of methods and ethics and data as well. And so I wonder if there's just maybe something there to share too, where there's lessons to be learned so we can do the research in an ethical way. Thank you.
And it was such a great point that Shelby raised, that you don't have the capability of sometimes collecting that data, but also the people to collect that data. So it's you know, the, I guess, equipment that you would need isn't quite available in a lot of these tribal areas or for these tribes or indigenous communities, but you also don't have the people. And so then the consultation comes from having those perspectives with people who do have those capabilities and those resources, rather than just, we will do what you need, but rather come on board and we will do it together. Yeah.
Yeah, and indigenous, there is, like, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there is like research done on and published about indigenous methodologies. So there are ways which are acceptable in the indigenous community, like going to specific indigenous community members, like the elders or the knowledge keepers, is important and is acceptable way within indigenous communities to like directly go to someone and ask for their to share with you, and as well as like having certain protocols with the exchange of knowledge. So yeah, I would recommend, if you're not aware of indigenous methodologies, to look into it. It really gives space for like storytelling and allows researchers to like not only do their interview, but also it gives them a chance to like learn more about their traditions and the whys and of why certain communities do things in a certain way, why they honor certain entities, and why they may not want to do a disaster plan because they're afraid it might cause more disaster to come. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
That's great. And I made a note in the chat that we can definitely add some of those to our post-session report. And definitely if anybody here is aware of some of those, because there's just probably no way we can include all of them, or may not even be aware of all of them. So definitely we can share some of those. And then if you have any additional ones that would be great for this group, please share them with us. A bit of an update also with the reports from sessions 1 and sessions 2. They are being developed, they're being reviewed, edited, read by other folks at the center, just making sure that they are clear, concise, and actually sharing everything that needs to be shared. So they are coming, they will be shared with everyone, and report for this session number 3 will also be shared. Thank all of you for your openness and your willingness to chat and to be here to learn. Nancy, thank you for sharing a resource in the chat. We're taking note of that as well. And this has been fantastic. We will have another, let me share my screen, another listening session next week. This will be the final virtual session but there will be a 5th session in person. So if any of you will be at the Natural Hazards Workshop in July, you are more than welcome to join us. If you are interested in learning more about that, about attending, registering, you can do that. I will post the link right now as well, or it might have already been posted. I see the chat came on, but we can add it on here so you can have it in your notes. And please let us know if you have any questions before the next session or before that in-person session. We're more than happy to answer. And thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, Melissa and Shelby.
Thank you all for joining us. Okay.